All right. Well, we're starting on we were actually about three-quarters of the way through the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. We're on page 682 in the chapter called At the Star Theater. And the date, well, there's a date coming. We're about 3 pages in from the beginning of the chapter. So it might still be Sunday, December 14th, 1884. And he's just talking there with everybody in the room, and he's having this wonderful uh, conversation with Girish, and but there's other people listening, and he was talking about having, when we thin out our ego, establishing a good relationship with God. And basically, he says the two top choices for that is God, you as servant, and God as master. Uh, which you kind of would have to understand that in a different way. In America, when we think master and servant, we automatically think of a terrible relationship where one's got a whip in his hand and the other one has to do the service. But actually, traditionally the relationship between master and servant is quite respectable between the two of them. You see it quite a bit in like Downton Abbey and those those things. It's like they are on different tiers of society, but there's a very established set of rules about how they interact, and it's very respectful and very caring and very healthy. It's not what we think of like as slavery or as such like that. So when he's talking about a relationship with God as master servant, it's sort of like a lifelong respected butler, who has been with the master of the house for their whole adult life. And there's a kinship there's a friendship there, there's a mutual respect there, and a very deep relationship, but it's a relationship within very clearly defined as far as who's responsible for what. And so that's what the master would be talking about. And then he said the other really good one is the attitude of a child toward its parent. So being the child of God, which I think is quite common. He goes on to say the attitude of a hero is not good. An attitude of the hero, that's kind of the lover, right? And kind of the the pirate captain sort of attitude. He says that's not a good one. Some people cherish it. They regard themselves as Purusha and woman as Prakriti. They want to propitiate woman through intercourse with her. But this method often causes disaster, right? Because the level of self-control that it takes to do those practices, those sexually oriented practices, are quite difficult. And so he always says, yeah, they're there, don't do it. He's he's like that's like coming in through the kitchen door. It's not the best one for folks. And he says most of the time the people who practice those paths usually have a disastrous end. They fall because most people will. That's just the nature of that. So he says, Girish says, well, at one time I too cherished that idea. Sri Ramakrishna looked at Girish pensively. You're like, hmm. Girish, I still have that twist in my mind. Tell me, what should I do? Sri Ramakrishna reflected a minute and said, give God your power of attorney. Let him do whatever he likes. The conversation then turned to Sri Ramakrishna's young devotees, the master, to Girish, and the others. In meditation, I see the inner traits of these youngsters. They have no thought of acquiring house and property. They do not crave sex pleasure. Those of the youngsters who are married do not sleep with their wives. The truth is that unless a man has gotten rid of all rajas and has acquired sattva, he cannot steadily dwell in God. He cannot love God and realize Him. All right, so he says quite a bit here. Just talking about the natural purity of these guys, that would become the direct disciples as they grew up. Quite astounding, that they really the spirit of renunciation was so natural with them, just so deep with them that even here in the very heart of their youth, they're not being carried away by any of these things. And this idea of rajas, rajas is that I can't sit still. I've always got to be doing something, very, very action oriented all the time. And he says, unless somebody gets some sattva, which is some balance, some calmness in there, a balance in your life, that it's hard to be able to hold your mind steadily in on the divine, on the beloved, in the heart. And so we want to go for kind of cultivating, if we can, a certain amount of control, a certain amount of placidity in our inner world. We want to we want to touch that peace, right? Because it's necessary for our mind to rest and to settle in the presence with the awareness of the presence of God. Girish, well, you've blessed me. Master, how was that? I said that you would succeed if you were sincere. Girish is wanting credit for a blessing here, and the master says, I didn't bless you. I just told you that if you were sincere, that you would get there. It's just a statement of fact. Saying this, the master exclaimed, Anandamayi, and went into samadhi. He remained in that state a long time. Regaining partial consciousness, he said, Where are those rascals? M brought Baburam to him. Sri Ramakrishna looked at Baburam and the other devotees and said, still in ecstasy, The bliss of Satchitananda is indeed good, but what about the bliss of divine inebriation? He began to sing. Once for all this time I have thoroughly understood. From one who knows it well, I have learned the secret of bhava. Again he sang, Why should I go to Ganga or Gaya, to Kashi, Kanchi, or Prabhas, so long as I can breathe my last with Kali's name upon my lips? The master continued saying, While praying to the Divine Mother, I said, O Mother, I don't seek anything else. Give me only pure love for you. Sri Ramakrishna was pleased with Girish's calm mood. He said to him, This mood of yours is good. The calm mood is the best. The master was seated in the manager's room. A man entered and said, Will you see the farce, the confusion of marriage? It's being played now. Sri Ramakrishna said to Girish, What have you done? This farce after the life of Prahlada? First sweets and rice pudding and then a dish of bitter herbs? Right? So you put on that beautiful spiritually oriented play, and now you're following it up with the second feature with, this confusion of marriage, a comedy about marriage. It's like what a strange juxtaposition you've done, right? First the sweets and rice pudding, and then a dish of bitter herbs. After the theater, the actresses, following Girish's instructions, came to the room to salute Sri Ramakrishna. They bowed down before him, touching the ground with their foreheads. The devotees noticed that some of the actresses were saluting the master, touching his feet. He said to them very tenderly, Oh, please don't do that, mother. After the actresses left the room, Sri Ramakrishna said to the devotees, It is all he, only in different forms. The carriage was ready out the door, and Girish and the others came to the street to see the master off. As soon as Sri Ramakrishna stepped into the carriage, he went into a deep samadhi. Narayan and several other devotees were with him. The carriage started for Dakshineshwar. This is I think it's one of the reasons that I felt so safe and attracted to Tagore is that not only in India but also here in this country at times, and certainly just through many places, that the theater was always considered a somewhat immoral environment. That quite often these leading actors and actresses would be escorts and would take on uh, what do you call that, sponsors, as it were, accept money from people. Of course there'd be favors involved, but that the whole thing was kind of just frowned upon, and so, quote, upstanding people wouldn't really frequent that, wouldn't really be around that. And it's quite something that Ramakrishna, being a sadhu, being a renunciate, being a temple priest, being as sincere and really established devotee of God, uh, not only would go and enjoy it, and then that the actresses, and the actors would come and take the dust of his feet at the end, and It to me that just it's marvelous. I mean, I just love that non-judgmental attitude that he had, that how his kindness and his generosity of spirit just went out to everybody. You know, it just I think it's a delightful thing, and it's one of the reasons that I'm so comfortable as a person with Ramakrishna. You know, that I just in a way it's helped me accept just and not worry about things. Just be who you are. Be honest about who you are. Be sincere in your desire to know the divine and to love God and go forward. Just don't give yourself any headaches because Thakur doesn't care, in that sense. He's bringing you forward. He's taken responsibility. He's working on you daily. He's matching your sincerity and earnestness. And so this it's a wonderful permission here, to be who you are and to trust in the grace of the divine and to enjoy God, to enjoy spiritual life and to stop stressing over it. Stop, set down all of your insecurities and just leave them to blow away at some other time, but don't nurture them anymore.
I have a comment, Swami.
Yes.
Swami Nirakarananda, right? He's from Argentina. He
Uh-huh.
was in Atlanta last week, and he said that human nature and divine nature coexist in one person. He was
Mhm.
giving the examples of people like Sri Ramakrishna. He went to those dramas and movies. At the same time, he's a divine figure, he's a human figure. So they both coexist in one person.
Yeah.
That's like Sri Ramachandra, Ramayana Rama. He is also divine and human nature, both existed in him. He gave so many examples to connect to that, which made very good sense to me.
Yes, yes.
Isn't it?
Yes, well,
Yeah,
it's exactly our situation as well.
exactly.
That we are both divine and word become flesh. And it really falls into line with what we've talked about, or at least I've mentioned a couple times in my last two lectures, which probably you weren't there. But anyway, in those lectures, we were talking about it's not what you do in life, it's how you do it in life that is
Mm-hmm.
important.
That's right.
And so Ramakrishna can go to the theater. It's not that going to the theater is wrong,
Wrong,
but it's
yes.
how did he go to the theater? He went to the theater, with devotees
Mm-hmm.
to see a spiritual show and to see it as a spiritual show. And he appreciated it. He went into Samadhi several times, and praised the show and then blessed the actors and actresses. So if when you go as you are. You are as such an ambassador of the divine in this world. And so you go around representing the divine love, representing divine compassion, representing divine, all of the divine characteristics. And whatever you do, that's what you do it with, yourself as a spiritual seeker. And so you bring that love and that non-judgmental equanimity of being wherever you go. You're always a blessing to the room that you're in, you know, not through effort and striving, but by simply being in the presence wherever you are all the time. The master was seated in the manager's room. A man entered and said, "Will you see the farce, the confusion of marriage? It's being played now." Sri Ramakrishna said to Girish, "What have you done? This farce after the life of Prahlada. First sweets and rice pudding, and then a dish of bitter herbs." Right? Okay, we've already read all of that. So he has these women come in and take the dust of his feet, and he blesses them. And his statement about them after everybody had left the room, he said, "It is all God, only in different forms." The carriage was ready at the door, and Girish and the others came to the street to see the master off. As soon as Sri Ramakrishna stepped into the carriage, he went into a deep samadhi. Narayan and several other devotees were with him. The carriage started for Dakshineshwar. All right, Saturday, December 27th, 1884. It was the Christmas season. Taking advantage of the holiday, many devotees came to the temple garden to visit the master, some of them arriving in the morning. Among these were Kedar and Ram, Nitya Gopal, Tarak, Surendra, M., Sharada Prasanna, and a number of young devotees. Excuse me. This was Sharada Prasanna's first visit. Master to M. Where is Bankim? Haven't you brought him with you? Bankim was a schoolboy whom Sri Ramakrishna had met in Bagh Bazar. Noticing him even from a distance, the master said that he was a fine boy. After a while, Sri Ramakrishna went to the Panchavati with the devotees. They surrounded him, still some sitting and some standing. He was seated on the cement platform around the tree, facing the southwest. He asked M with a smile, "Have you brought the book?" M. Yes, sir. Master, read a little to me. The devotees were eager to know the name of the book, as are we. It was called Devi Chudharani. The master had heard that the book dealt with motiveless action. He had also heard of the great renown of its author, Bankim Chandra Chatterjee, whom he had met some days before, and he wanted to gauge the author's mind from the book. M said, "A young girl, the heroine, fell into the hands of a robber named Bhavani Patak. Her name had been Prafula, but the robber changed it to Devi Chudharani. At heart, Bhavani was a good man. He made Prafula go through many spiritual disciplines. He also taught her how to perform selfless action. He robbed wicked people, and with that money fed the poor and the helpless. He said to Prafula, 'I chastise the wicked and protect the virtuous.'" Master, but that's a king's duty. Right? That's a king's duty. You're out of line doing that. That's a king's duty. M. In one place, the author writes of bhakti, of devotion. Bhavani Patak sent a girl named Nishi to keep Prafula company. Nishi was full of piety and looked on Krishna as her husband. Prafula was already married. She had lost her father and lived with her mother. The neighbors had created a scandal about her character and avoided her, and so her father-in-law had not allowed her to live with his son. Later, her husband had married again, but Prafula was extremely devoted to her husband. To Sri Ramakrishna. Now, sir, you can follow the story. M. read. Nishi. I am a daughter of Bhavani Patak. He is my father. He has also, in a way, given me in marriage. Prafula. Oh, what do you mean? Nishi. I have surrendered my all to Krishna. Prafula. How is that? Nishi. My beauty, my youth, and my soul. Prafula. Then he is your husband. Nishi. Yes, because he alone is my husband, who completely possesses me. Prafula with a sigh. I do not know. You talk that way because you do not know what a husband is. If you had a real husband, you could never have liked Krishna. The foolish Brajeshwar, Prafula's husband, was unaware that his wife loved him so much. Nishi. All can love Sri Krishna because he has infinite beauty. He has infinite youth and infinite splendor. This young lady was a disciple of Bhavani and well versed in logic, but Prafula was illiterate. She could not answer Nishi's arguments, but the writers of the Hindu social laws knew the reply. God is infinite, no doubt, but he cannot keep the infinite in the small cage of the heart. One can do so only with the finite. Therefore, the infinite creator of the universe is worshipped by the Hindu in a cage of his heart as Sri Krishna, the finite personal God. The husband of a woman has a still more definite form. Therefore, if the wife cherishes pure conjugal love, the husband becomes the first step toward God. Hence, the husband is the only deity to the Hindu woman. Other societies are inferior to Hindu society in this respect. Prafula was an ignorant girl. She could not understand Nishi's arguments. She said, "Friend, I do not understand all these arguments, but you haven't yet told me your name." Nishi. Bhavani Patak has given me the name of Nishi, night. I am the sister of Diva, day. One day I shall introduce my sister to you. Let me continue what I was saying. God alone is the real husband, and to a woman the husband is her only God. Sri Krishna is the God of all. Why should we cherish two deities, two gods? If you divide a little bhakti of the small heart, how little there will be. Prafula, don't be silly. Is there any limit to a woman's bhakti, to a woman's devotion? Nishi, there is no end to a woman's love, but bhakti is one thing and love is another. Summarizing part of the book, M said that Bhavani initiated Prafulla into spiritual life. He continued reading. During the first year, Bhavani did not allow any man to enter Prafulla's house, nor did he allow her to speak to any man outside of the house. During the second year, the rule was about speaking was withdrawn, but no man was allowed inside her house. In the third year, Prafulla shaved her head. Now Bhavani allowed his select disciples to see her. The shaven-headed disciple would converse with them on scriptural topics, keeping her eyes cast to the ground. Wow. It's kind of amazing the strict spiritual regimen that she's being put through by a thief. But of course it's a Robin Hood, not really just a thief. But M then read that Prafulla began to study of the scriptures, that she finished grammar and read Raghuvamsa, Kamara Sambhava, Shakuntala, and Naishadha, and she studied a little of the Samkhya, Vedanta, and Nyaya philosophies. Wow. So she's quite a learned person as well. Master, do you know what that means? People like the author of this book believe that knowledge is impossible without the study of books. They think that first comes the knowledge of books and then comes the knowledge of God. In order to know God, one must read books. But if you want to know Jadu Malik, must I first know the number of his houses and the amount of money he has in government securities? Do I really need all of this information? Rather, I should somehow enter his house, and be it by flattering his gatekeepers or by disregarding their rough treatment, and talk to Jadu Malik himself. Then, if I want to know about his wealth or possessions, I shall have only to ask him about them. Then it will be a very easy matter for me. First comes Rama, then his riches, that is, the universe. This is why Valmiki repeated the mantra Mara. Ma means God, and Ra, the world, that is to say, his riches, right? So he's saying, that you don't have to come to God through books, right? It's not a matter of an arrangement of thoughts. Spiritual life is not an arrangement of philosophies or dharma or dogmas and creeds, right? He says, if you want to know God, sit down and go into the shrine and meet him. Sit and go within yourself, right? Find him there within. And yes, books can help the mind stay pure and it can help point you in directions that will be helpful for you. But the thing itself does not lie in books, not even one book. It lies within the heart of every person, in the drawing room of God, where you can meet him. The devotees listened to the master's words with rapt attention. M continued with the story of Prafulla. Prafulla finished her studies and then practiced spiritual austerity for many days. Then one day, Bhavani visited her. He wanted to instruct her about selfless work. He quoted to her from the Gita, therefore, do thou always perform obligatory actions without attachment. By performing action without attachment, one attains to the highest. He told her that the three characteristics of disinterested action: first, control of the sense organs; second, absence of egotism; and third, surrendering the fruit of action to Sri Krishna. Right? So for us to live in this world in a state of worship, right, in being in the present moment completely, it requires that we not stretch our tasks out over time, right? That we don't do them for a purpose, for an achievement at some future point. That everything that we do is never done within its story of what we're going to get from it, but every action is taken in and of itself as an act of worship, right? And so we take every action in the moment and apply our love to it, our wisdom to it, and our presence to it, right? And then we send it on its way as a form of worship. And so we're always staying in the moment, always staying in the presence, always expressing our divine nature and keeping our mind in that peaceful place of the heart, not letting our actions become part of story, become part of egotism. right? And so he says, if we're trying to approach God, the first is the control of the sense organs, right? Because you have to raise your level of consciousness above your body. You have to stop seeing the world as a body, right? You have to stop seeing other people as bodies because you ultimately have to know yourself as spirit, as divine. And unfortunately, as long as you see yourself as a body and you're interested in body things, it's like having a brick tied to your tail. You can't climb the wall. It just keeps pulling you back, keeps pulling you back, keeps pulling you back. And so this control of the sense organs is a very important thing. And it's not just sexual. The sense organs are all of your senses. All of them have to be put into moderation. They have to be placed in service to you. You should not be serving them, right? So you are the one that dictates, and you are in control. When you say no, it's no. When you say yes, it's yes, like that. So those are the three things there: the control of the sense organs, the lack of egotism, and then not doing anything for a result, but doing it as an act of worship. So he says he further told her that no dharma is possible for the egotistic person, right? Right action can't be done by a person who's egotistical, because the egotistical person is always serving me and mine, right? And that's never dharmic. Selfishness in any form is never dharmic, right? Never takes us in the right direction. Quoting from the Gita, he said, the gunas of Prakriti perform all action. With the understanding deluded by egotism, man thinks I am the doer, right? And so we see here that with the understanding, that the gunas, which sattva, rajas, and tamas, these three levels of vibration are actually the things that are running the universe, right? They're it's kind of hard to understand exactly what they are. Vivekananda sort of treats them like elements, but they're really sort of vibratory things, like your inertia is very low vibration. Things are very thick and very sturdy and very in tamas, in inertia. And then there's rajas, which is a vibration. Just you can't sit still. You're always engaged in action. You just always have to be busy. You're just one of those people you can't sit still. Right. And so those are the two extremes, your inertia and your rajas. And then sattva is in the middle. It's the balance between the two, where you have just the right amount of inertia and just the right amount of action, and you're just steady and smooth in a very sustainable state in between there. And that is sattva. And that is where we have to go in order to realize the divine, in order to see the divine. Right. That's where we find our inner self at balance, right? We're no longer in the senses being pulled out into the world of rajas and change. And we're also not in a sense of inertia, a sense of laziness, doing nothing, but we're exactly where we should be, right? Balanced in the middle, right? Where grace is really the rudder that keeps us from being in turbulence, right? It's grace that keeps us calm and keeps us centered and keeps us moving forward regardless of our actions, good or bad. Bhavani next spoke to her about surrendering the fruit of action to Sri Krishna. Again, he quoted from the Gita: whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you give away, whatever austerity you practice, O son of Kuti, do that as an offering unto me. Right? So we do everything as an offering to God. Everything is done in a form, in an act of worship. Even if it's not an act of worship, like whenever my parents call, whenever my parents call, I know that's always a tricky place for a monk to be talking to his parents. And so I always, sometimes I've actually sometimes prayed so long the phone stopped ringing, but, but, but usually when that phone rings and I see who it is, I'm always like, okay, Ma, I lay this before you. May this be peaceful. May this be a conversation of mutual welfare. May there be respect and calmness. May there be understanding. I go through this whole thing just trying to prepare my mind to be steady because the reason that monks are kind of called away from their families is that our families have the biggest hold on our identity, right? You're always going to be mom's boy. You're always going to be dad's son. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you become super swami or whether you're sitting there in samadhi, whether you're going in and out of heaven. It doesn't matter. You're always going to be the boy, right? You're always going to be mom's boy and dad's son, and you can't escape that. And so any time that I pick up the phone to talk with my family, I pray to get into that session, that state of mind, and I try to bring the idea to the forward of the mind that my father is God, my mother is God, my brothers are God, right? And so that I can stay in that even keel and not be pulled into old behaviors and old arguments and old whatever. You never know what's going to come at you, right? And so that's the way we live our life. We're always trying to stay in the chapel of the heart, always staying there in the shrine, always trying to keep our view accurate as to our nature being divine, being spirit. We're not body, we're not mind, right? And you go forward trying to pristinely maintain that equanimity, that balance. And of course, in time, it becomes natural because that's your nature. You're as you slowly return to being truly human, right? All right. Master, that is fine. These are the words of the Gita. One cannot refute them. But something else must be noted. The author speaks about surrendering the fruit of action to Sri Krishna, but not about cultivating bhakti for him. M. No, that is not especially mentioned here. Next, Prafula and Bhavani talk about the use of money. Prafula said that she offered all her wealth to Krishna. M read from the book again. Prafula, like my actions, I offer all my wealth to Sri Krishna. Bhavani, all? Prafula, yes, all. Bhavani, in that case, you won't be able to perform action in a detached spirit. If you have to work to earn your food, you will be attached to that work. Hence, there are two alternatives before you. Either you will have to get your food by begging, or you're going to have to live on your money. Even a beggar becomes attached to the alms he receives. Therefore, you must use your own money to maintain your body. M. To the master, smiling. That is the nature of a calculating mind. Master. Yes, that is the nature of a calculating mind. That is the way the worldly man thinks, right? He's always thinking, calculating, right? Always debits and balances, you know, debits and credits in there. Who's ahead? Where do things have to be? Yes, that is the nature of the calculating mind. That is the way the worldly man thinks. But he who seeks God plunges headlong. He doesn't calculate about how much or how little he needs for the protection of his body. M. Next, Bhavani asked Prafula, how will you offer all this money to Sri Krishna? Prafula said, why, Sri Krishna dwells in all beings. I shall distribute the money among them. Bhavani answered, good, good. Quoting from the Gita, Bhavani said, he who sees me in all things and all things in me never becomes separated from me, nor do I become separated from him. Right? This is that wonderful thing. We've talked a little bit about this, right? How all of this is divine, that everything around you, all of the forms that you're seeing are symbols within mind for the information that it receives from the senses. And what is it using to create all of these symbols that looks like the world? It's that dream stuff, that stuff that you build your dreams with at night. And what is that? That is Brahman. That is God, right? It is God who has become all of these things. John chapter 1 says the exact same thing. It is God that has become all of this. And if you walk around the world knowing that and remembering that, right? If you walk around the world knowing that and remembering that, then you're never far from God, obviously. You're in the knowledge, right, of the nature of things, right? Master smiling. Let's see what blah, blah, blah. Right. So quoting from the Gita, Bhavani says, he who sees me in all things and all things in me never becomes separated from me, nor do I become separated from him. That yogi who, established in unity, worships me, dwelling in all beings, abides in me, whatever his mode of life, right? So whatever he's doing with his life, this is indicative of a person not having to be any particular profession or any particular anything, right? If you walk around the world knowing that everything you're looking at is divine, no, right? And not forgetting that, constantly knowing that you're in the presence, then it doesn't matter. You can be working as a lawyer, you can be working as a dentist, you can be working as a monk, you can be you could be homeless. It doesn't, that is not what matters. The fact is that you will be inundated with the divine beloved always, and you will be always in that presence. And that is the one most important thing, right? Love, being in the presence of love and thereby loving constantly. Whatever his mode of life, O Arjuna, that yogi is regarded as the highest, who judges the pleasure and pain of all beings by the same standard that he applies to himself. Right? That's a fancy way of saying do unto others as you would have them do unto you. You see yourself in everybody, and so you respect everybody. You see yourself in everybody, so you always make sure they get the first piece of pizza. You always make sure that they're taken care of first, right? Because we treat others as we would have them treat us. So we go around loving. The master, these are the characteristics of the highest bhakta, right? The highest lover of God. This is what it looks like. Someone who's constantly inundated in that presence, always aware of the divine presence in all things. M read again from the book. A man must work hard if he wants to help all beings with charity. Hence, it is necessary for him to make a little display of clothes, of pomp and luxury. Therefore, Bhavani said, a little shopkeeping is necessary. Uh-oh, the master does not like this one. The master says sharply, a little shopkeeping is necessary. One speaks as one thinks. If a man thinks of worldly things day and night and deals with people hypocritically, then his words are colored by his thoughts. If one eats radish, one belches radish. Instead of talking about shopkeeping, he should rather have said a man should act as if he were the doer, knowing very well that he is really not the doer. The other day, a man was singing here. The song contains words like profit and loss. I stopped him. If one contemplates a particular subject day and night, one cannot talk of anything else. Right? We start seeing the world that way. When I was a computer engineer, I saw the way my brain worked as a computer. And I started seeing the way the world worked with all these sub processes and these algorithms interacting and trading variables and sending back results. I started to see the whole world operating like a computer, right? So the way we use our minds strongly indicates how we see the world. Right? And so this is why we practice, this is why we try to practice intently to make the biggest impression on the day in the mind as God-centered, as spirit-centered, so that we can manage to try and hold on to that state or that steady perspective uh, while we ride the bronco of whatever our day brings to us, right? The reading continued. The author was describing the realization of God. Prafulla had become Devi Chudharani. It was the month of Vaishak. Devi was seated on the roof of her houseboat talking with Diva and another woman companion. The moon was up. The boat had cast anchor in the Ganges. The conversation turned to the question of whether one could see God. Devi said, as the aroma of a flower is directly perceived by the nose, so God is directly perceived by the mind. At this point, the master interrupted and said, yes, God is directly perceived by the mind, but not by this ordinary mind. It is the pure mind that perceives God. And at that time, this ordinary mind does not function. Right? So what he's saying there, pure mind is a mind with no thought of me and mine in it. Me and mine is what causes the ocean of thought to churn, to become excited, right? So whenever the thought of me and mine is in the mind is noisy and the mind is thinking lots of things and is falling into time-space causation and all of that other necessary stuff because of the idea of me and mine requires all of that, right? So he's saying it's not that noisy mind that can see God, right? Because it's directly to the mind that God is seen. It's not through senses, it's direct, right? That's why it's such an overpowering experience. And when God appears, the mind has to be absolutely placid, right? So that the reflection of God in mind can be clearly seen. If you've got a lake with a bunch of waves on it, the moon may reflect in it, but you're not going to know it's the moon. There's just going to be lots of shards of white, reflecting in the waves. But if that ocean is calm, then the moon is clearly seen, reflecting as itself within that calm mind. And so it is with the divine. When you are centered, when you're not caught in the stories of egoism, when you're not identified with body, mind, and all of their desires and demands, only then does the mind calm. And in that calmness, God is, right? God is. The master interrupted and said, yes, God is directly perceived by the mind, but not by this ordinary mind, meaning the mind with me and mine in it, right? The mind that thinks and calculates and is always churning. It is the pure mind, and anytime we read pure, it's always lack of me and mine. It is the pure mind that perceives God, and at that time, this ordinary mind does not function, which means it is not the thinker. At that time, it's silent. It's silent mind, pure mind. A mind that has the slightest trace of attachment to the world cannot be called pure, right? Because that attachment has to be from a particular to a particular. So me and mine exists, and attachment is the natural state of a mind filled with me and mine, right? Because it's always trying to balance itself, always trying to hold on to itself, to prove itself. At this point, the master interrupted and said, "Oh, we got that. A mind that has the slightest trace of attachment to the world cannot be called pure. When all the impurities of the mind are removed, you may call that mind pure mind or pure Atman, right? So they're the same. Pure mind, pure Atman, and Brahman. They're all the same. Pure Atman, again, means not a differentiated Atman. A pure Atman is the absolute, the same as Brahman. M. The author says a little later that God cannot easily be perceived by the mind. He says that one needs a telescope to have that direct vision.
Now we got to text you a little bit
Yeah,
earlier.
I know.
It's a bad time.
Yeah, well, you guess you made a bedtime again.
Oh, did I?
Wait,
Oh my God. Are you on the phone still?
just a moment.
Not still, again.
Okay. Sorry about that. All right. The author says a little later that God cannot easily be perceived by the mind. He says that one needs a telescope to have that direct vision. Yoga is the telescope. Yoga, as it is described in the Gita, is of three kinds: either the path of knowledge, the path of bhakti, the path of devotion, or the path of action, karma. One is able to see God through this telescope of yoga. Master, that's very good. These are the words of the Gita. M. At last Devi Chudarani met her husband. She showed him great devotion and said to him, you are my God. I wanted to learn the worship of another God, but I did not succeed. You have taken the place of all gods. The master smiling, I did not succeed. That is the dharma of a woman totally devoted to her husband. This also is a path. Wow, very nice. So this path of seeing and worshiping your spouse as God is also a path. The reading was over. The master was smiling. The devotees looked at him eagerly, waiting to hear what he would say. The master to the devotees smiling. This is not so bad. It is called the Dharma of chastity, the single-minded devotion of a wife to her husband. If God can be worshipped through an image, why shouldn't it be possible to worship him through a living person? It is God himself who sports in the world as men. Oh, what a state I passed through! I passed some days absorbed in Shiva and Durga, and some days absorbed in Radha and Krishna, and some days absorbed in Sita and Rama. Assuming Radha's attitude toward Krishna, I would cry for Krishna, and assuming Sita's attitude with Ram, I would cry for Rama. But Leela is by no means the last word. Passing through all of these states, I said to the Divine Mother, Mother, in all of these states there is separation. Give me a state where there is no separation. Then I remained for some time absorbed in the indivisible Satchit Ananda. I removed the pictures of the gods and goddesses from my room. I began to perceive God in all beings. Formal worship dropped away. You see that bell tree? I used to go there to pluck its leaves. One day, as I plucked a leaf, a bit of the bark came off. I found the tree full of consciousness. I felt grieved because I had hurt the tree. One day I tried to pluck some durva grass, but I found I couldn't do it very well. Then I forced myself to pluck it. I cannot cut a lemon. The other day I managed to cut one only with great difficulty. I chanted the name of Kali and cut the fruit as they slaughter an animal before the goddess. One day I was about to go gather some flowers. They were everywhere on the trees. At once I had the vision of Virat. It appeared that his worship was just over. The flowers looked like a bouquet placed on the head of the deity. I could not pick them. God sports through man as well. I see man as the embodiment of Narayana. As fire is kindled when you rub two pieces of wood together, so God can be seen in man if you have intense devotion. If there is suitable bait, big fish like carp gulp it down at once. When one is intoxicated with prema, one sees God in all beings. The gopis saw Krishna in everything. To them, the whole world was filled with Krishna. They said that they themselves were Krishna. They were then in a God-intoxicated state. Looking at the trees, they said, these are hermits absorbed in meditation on Krishna. Looking at the grass, they said, the hair of the earth is standing on end at the touch of Krishna. What a beautiful that thing that is. I love that. We were talking about the redwood trees last week. And here, listen to this. They were then in God-intoxicated state. Looking at the trees, the gopis said, these are hermits absorbed in the meditation on God, on Krishna. Wow, what a cool thought. That, to be the ultimate hermit is to be a tree and to be in constant meditation on God as a tree. What a beautiful, beautiful ideal. The hair of the earth is standing on end at the touch of Krishna. Devotion to the husband is also a dharma. The husband is God. Why shouldn't it be so? If God can be worshipped through an image, why not also through a living man? But three things are necessary in order to feel the presence of God in an image. First, the devotion of the priest. Second, a beautiful image. And third, the devotion of the householder. Vaishnav Charan once said that in the end, the mind of the devotee is absorbed in the human manifestation of God. But you must remember one thing. One cannot see God sporting as man unless he has had the vision of him. Do you know the sign of one who has God vision? Such a man acquires the nature of a child. Why a child? Because God is like a child. So he who sees God becomes like a child. God vision is necessary. Now the question is, how can one get it? Intense renunciation is the means. A man should have such intense yearning for God that he can say, O Father of the universe, am I outside your universe? Won't you be kind to me, you wretch? He always surprises me. That's that tamasic attitude toward God, you know. You partake of the nature of him on whom you meditate. By worshiping Shiva, you acquire the nature of Shiva. A devotee of Rama meditated on Hanuman day and night. He used to think he had become Hanuman. In the end, he was firmly convinced that he had even grown a little tail. Jnana is of the characteristic of Shiva, and Bhakti of Vishnu. One who partakes of Shiva's nature becomes a Jnani, and one who partakes of Vishnu's nature becomes a Bhakta. M. What about Chaitanya Deva? You said that he had both knowledge and devotion. Master, sharply. His case was different. He was an incarnation of God. There is a great difference between him and an ordinary man. The fire of Chaitanya's renunciation was so great that when Sarvabhauma poured sugar on his tongue, instead of melting, it evaporated into the air. He was always absorbed in samadhi. How great was his conquest of lust! To compare him with a man! A lion eats meat, and yet it mates only once in 12 years, but a sparrow eats a grain, and it indulges in sex life day and night. Such is the difference between a divine incarnation and an ordinary human being. An ordinary man and renounces lust, but once in a while he forgets his vow. He cannot control himself. To M. He who has realized God looks on man as a mere worm. One cannot succeed in religious life if one has shame, hatred, or fear. These are the fetters. Have you heard of the 8 fetters? How can one who is eternally perfect be afraid of the world? He knows how to play his game. An eternally perfect soul can even lead a worldly life if he desires. There are people who can fence with 2 swords at the same time. They are such expert fencers that if stones are thrown at them, the stones hit the swords and come back. All right, we'll stop there for today.